This is the Canon R6. Now I've had this camera for about 2 years now and I've put it through its paces. It's an amazing camera, there's a lot I love about it, and there's also some things I really don't like. And not only do I have one, but I have one filming me right now, and I have a top-down angle as well. Now, is this camera for you? Let's start with the positives. Now, I have some pretty large hands, but it feels very good in my hand. The grip is great, it is lightweight, and it overall just feels great to shoot with. It has a flip-out LCD screen. Every camera should have one of these at this point. It also has dual SD card slots. This is going to be real important if you're shooting events or if you're shooting for clients. A minor inconvenience about this camera is the placement where photo and where video mode is. If you do a little bit of both, if you shoot photos and videos, then you're gonna have to swing this dial all the way around just to switch from photo mode into video mode. That does get annoying if you do a lot of both photo and video. Now, aside from the button placement, something else that really does bug me about this camera is the HDMI. It is still a micro HDMI. The EOS R from previous generation was a mini. This is not even a mini, it's a micro. And honestly, I feel like camera companies at this point should just put full-size HDMIs in all of their cameras. You look at some of the newer Sonys like the A7S III, and they all have full-size HDMIs, so we really need Canon to step up their game, because a full-size HDMI would be clutch on this camera, especially if you do streaming or if you use external monitors. Speaking of streaming, something that's really annoying about this camera that I haven't heard anybody else talk about is the fact that you cannot record and stream HDMI at the same time. Let me explain what I mean. When you're live streaming and you have an HDMI output going to a transmitter or any other device that is then streaming it to YouTube or a switcher, it is not able to record in camera and send the stream at the same time without an external monitor. I've not figured out how to fix this issue. If anyone knows how to fix it, let me know in the comments. I've tried everything, but when you output an HDMI signal out of here, the screen goes dark, you need an external monitor if you want to stream. Now, the next thing about this camera is going to be the megapixels. Let's talk about the megapixels. It is a 20 megapixel camera, and I don't know why people are still getting caught up over this, because in today's day and age, these sensors are absolutely amazing. And so you'll not be able to tell any downgrade of image quality because it's 20 megapixels. I would even consider the 20 megapixels a plus, because compared to something like the R5 with its 45 megapixels, if you're shooting large volume projects, thousands of photos, those 45 megapixel files will eat up SD card space, will eat up SSD space, and you'll end up spending way more on storage. So if you're shooting events that require large volume, I would highly recommend a camera with lower megapixels. Not only that, but it's better in low light. The lower the megapixel count, the better it usually is in low light. Speaking of low light, when it comes to the R6, it does very well in low light. With the firmware update, it gives us C-Log 3. If you're shooting C-Log 3, I would highly recommend that you use 800 ISO or intervals of 800 ISO. 800, 32, 64, 12,800. Those will give you the best picture quality with the least amount of noise. I've shot this in many low light events. Weddings, receptions are very dark, and it performs amazingly. If you're using C-Log 3, use those intervals and you're going to be in good hands. Now let's talk about the autofocus. In photo mode, the autofocus is absolutely amazing. Fast, precise, and accurate. I've had no problems in photo mode nailing the focus perfectly. Now, I wish I could say the same for video. For video, it's a little different, but there is a way to fix that. Now, if you're doing things like this, talking head, where the subject isn't moving too much, it does an amazing job. Even if I move toward the camera, right now it's in eye autofocus mode, it is sticking up with absolutely no problems. But when the subject moves around a little bit more, that's when it starts to hunt. I have noticed that it hunts to the background, to the foreground, to the subject, and it has a hard time when the subject is moving real fast. Now, there is a fix to this if you want a lot less hunting in your photos. Go to your settings, go to autofocus, go to the third tab. Now, if you scroll down to switching tracked subjects, click that, change it from on subject to initial priority. This will tell the camera to go ahead and prioritize your initial focus point. And just like that, your camera will stop hunting. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the overheating. This is everyone's complaint about the R6. Should this prevent you from buying the R6? That's the question I'm here to answer. Now, the R6 does overheat, but it depends on how you're shooting. For example, if you shoot 4K 60 for long periods of time, such as 10, 15, 20-minute videos, it is a lot more likely to overheat. Now, I have noticed that if you're shooting short 15, 20-second clips, it'll go for a very long time without overheating, and it may not even be a problem for you, depending on how you shoot. But when you're shooting 4K 60 in longer periods of time, it will overheat. There are a few ways around it. For example, if you want to extend your time before the camera overheats, you could change the frame rate. For example, this video right here is shot at 4K 30 instead of 4K 60. At 4K 30, I've been shooting for about 20 minutes now, and it's doing just fine, no issues at all. Now that might change because the battery you're using, the SD card you're using, the weather, climate that you're in right now. Now shooting at 30 or 24 will give you a lot more time than shooting at 60. There is no overheating when it comes to shooting 1080, whether you're at 60, 30, or 24. When it comes to overheating, it's a 4K issue. If you need to be shooting for long periods of time in 4K, I would not recommend this camera. It looks amazing, not to mention the C-Log 3 that comes with it is one of the best profiles to color grade. The colors that you bring back are absolutely amazing, especially for those people who are doing photography as a side gig or a hobby. This camera is more than enough. If you're shooting for clients, if you're shooting shorter videos, or even photography, this camera will handle it and will do amazing. So is this camera still worth it? For the majority of people, 100%. This camera is an absolute unit. If you previously had an APS-C camera, or if you had an RP or an M50 or even a Rebel, this is leagues ahead of it. Now the price is also a jump. Now that the R6 Mark II is out, the R6 is selling for a lot less than before, especially on the used market. This camera is absolutely worth it for the money, especially if you're upgrading from a lower camera. Now if you already have full frame such as the EOS R, I would consider maybe going for the R6 Mark II or the R5. I'll be doing reviews on that shortly as well. Hopefully this video helped you make a decision on the R6. Hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll be coming out with more videos on the R5 and R6 Mark II. Stay tuned for those. To the 5 people still watching, see you next time.